I think it's immoral enough that you would want to demolish somebody's home, not give them an opportunity to actually be consulted on something as immediate as the demolition of their home. But also on top of that, given that these social housing, primarily council houses, were actually paid for and maintained by the taxpayer, makes it that extra little bit disgusting and immoral. Essentially, it's just the transfer of public assets into private hands at the expense of families and communities, and it's not even just the thing of displacement. It's not even a case of people are becoming homeless and displaced. It's a case of people are dying, especially a lot of the elderly people in our estates who haven't made it through eviction or demolition because their key support structures, those people on their estates, not just their neighbours, but their lifelines, their support, their lifelines, you know what I mean? So it goes a lot deeper, actually, than just displacement and homelessness. We know where they're going. It's not a case of even guessing or even having an informed guess, an educated guess. It's about seeing what's already been done. So people being moved out as far as Luton, Birmingham, Manchester, so on and so forth, which of course there's nothing wrong with these areas. It's just that these aren't the communities in which these people were born into. And of course, when they're being moved out, it's not just a case of moving home. It's a case of moving their children's schools, their jobs, and every other aspect of their life. You know what I mean? Well, at this rate, I can imagine there won't be any more working class people in London because, as it is, the truth is that a lot of social housing and council houses are, inhabited, occupied by working class people. So I would imagine that they're going to expect working class people to commute into London every day to serve the rich, which I personally won't be doing. I mean, London is going to be a playground for the rich. That is what it's going to be. You're physically not going to be able to live in the area in which you were born and raised and have a right to be in if you don't have money. I would say it's a fair statement to make that a lot of the people who are having their estates demolished and regenerated were consulted, if you want to call it a consultation, after the decision had been made, of course. So they were finding out that their homes were going to be demolished after that decision had already been made. Then, of course, there was the official consultation, which, of course, was an empty box-ticking exercise, as it is. So, I mean, typically a lot of these consultations aren't even actually carried out in a place that's accessible to the community. For example, at the Brixton Arches, Network Rail's community consultation took place at a tiny room in the back of the Brixton Recreation Centre, which you had to go through a little maze and go upstairs and try and find it, and then of course you're met with security guards who aren't letting certain people in, so you can't even access your own consultation. But the point is that these consultations are they're lip service, they're nothing, because the voices of the people on the estates are completely ignored. It's not an exaggeration, it's not me trying to make it seem like, they don't care about us, they're not even listening to us. Look at Aylesbury. I think on Aylesbury, 76% of the residents in Aylesbury turned out to vote, and I think 73% of them opposed the demolition of their estate and actually wanted a refurbishment. And that was actually a vote that was facilitated by the council. Because a lot of the times, for example, at Cressingham Gardens, when I said to Inside Housing magazine, well, Cressingham Gardens had their own vote on whether or not, they wanted their homes to be demolished. And, what Inside Housing said was, well, and what the Lambeth Council said was, well, actually, that wasn't an official ballot. Well, look at Aylesbury, that was an official ballot. It's quite clear that there is absolutely no benefits for residents on these estates, whether they're tenants or whether they're leaseholders. There is no benefit for them whatsoever. A leaseholder will be served with a compulsory purchase order. They'll receive a fraction of what their house is worth. And then that money isn't enough for them to actually buy in the area. They're forced out of London and certainly out of the area. And then, of course, the tenants are told that they're going to be coming back to a nice, new, empty, shiny estate, new, shiny flat, and everything's going to be fine. But, of course, the reality is that what they come back to is less than adequate standards of living with regards to smaller places, smaller properties, smaller gardens, and, of course, hugely increased rent levels, which they're not able to afford. And even if they are able to afford it, even if they are able to return, the money that's costing them in rent is leaving them living a hand-to-mouth existence with regards to the rest of their lives, because their money's going into rent. And these are working people, these are working couples, these aren't people on benefits, these are working professional people, a lot of them, and they're still not able to afford the new rents. So Yeah, that's the reality of it, unfortunately. And it's actually the tenants a lot of the time who are tricked into thinking, well, maybe we should let them demolish our estate because, there's a bit of graffiti on the wall, or the stuff in my estate isn't working anyway. I've been writing to the council for years to try and get them to do repairs. Maybe the council do care. Maybe they're going to just, smash down my home and we'll all come back to a shiny new place. But of course, that's not the reality. This country views housing as a commodity and not a human right. And I think actually it's that viewpoint, that kind of general consensus, which I even think is there, that housing is an asset, is something that, people don't deserve. It isn't a human right. That seems to be like the public narrative in this country. But of course, that's the official narrative and not the narrative of everybody on the street, everybody living on the estates, everybody who truly has a heart. Does believe that housing is a human right. It's not, being treated that way because, of course, people want to make money. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of money to be made in housing and land. What do we have to do to achieve that? Is to carry on organising on our estates, to try and identify the issues a lot earlier than we currently are, to start teaching other residents on other estates what we've learned from our battles, and to build the intensity of our resistance. It feels almost like we've just been finding our feet in a way, and actually I think there's a lot to come around the corner, and certainly I know a lot of individuals who are planning a lot of other moves and manoeuvres to try and combat that. But yeah, essentially just like teaching what we know to other people who haven't yet been through that experience, who are potentially going to have to fight to survive.